Well, better late than never, I suppose. I'm actually so late that it was announced that GameSquare, the parent company of Complexity, is buying out Faze, meaning that it is very likely that Faze's CS2 team will be dissolved, and rumor has it that Twistzz will rejoin Liquid with this disgusting roster. So in honor of one of my favorite NA players returning to what is admittedly a no longer NA roster, today's Intangibles of Counter-Strike will not only be about what we can learn from Twistz's unique style of play, but also what he brings back to Liquid in context to this rumored roster. So not only will we be analyzing what Twistzz does in a mostly individual environment of level 10 Faceit, but also how his playstyle applies to the team-oriented pro stage. The games will be differentiated by the color of the HUD. And with that out of the way, let's get started. Twistzz has a very unique position in the rosters that he is a part of. He specializes in utility, but he's not quite a support player, and he often plays solo, but he isn't really a lurker either. What Twistzz is really quite good at is controlling space, either as an anchor on CT side or a flank watcher on T side. Of course, his incredible aim makes him versatile as a second entry or any role honestly, but as we're going to see in Faze's 13-0 game against ENCE at IEM Sydney, is that he thrives in situations where he can play a little bit more defensively. This heavily influences his philosophy on how he uses utility on the T side, where we're going to see Twistzz oftentimes throw most of his utility 30 seconds into the round, so that he can focus more on utilizing his insane aim to get frags or punish CTs who are trying to get aggressive. I'm not going to go over where each of his nades land, although I would highly recommend Pimp's Anubis Smokes video, as it goes over all of the nades that Twistzz throws and more. But what I really want to focus on is the less map dependent philosophy of throwing nades early. Normally, nades are thrown with a more immediate intention, such as smoking a gap to cross, flashing to clear a corner or get a frag, throwing mollies to flush out enemies, etc. But by consistently throwing nades at the beginning of the round, you not only lose out on not being able to use utility in late round scenarios, but also make each nade less effective, especially when you don't have a proper follow-up to each nade, as Twistzz often doesn't as he waits outside of B after throwing all of his nades. So why waste the nades that could be used for a more tangible purpose? Well, these nades actually have an incredibly crucial role, which is to condition the CTs. Constant smokes, flashes, and mollies towards B site Anubis forces the CTs to stay on site and keeps them on their toes, even if the Ts aren't even considering B. The truth is that people tend to not move from their spot once they settle out of fear that their opponent is holding for them. So when the site is constantly covered in the same smokes and flashes, the CTs tend to play in much more predictable angles, where Twistzz knows where they will play having thrown these smokes dozens of times, making his already insane crosshair placement even better as he limits the potential angles that the CTs can play from. Take a look at how Twistzz takes Anubis mid in both his Faceit game and his match against ENCE. The round starts with Twistzz throwing some variation of the bridge smoke to block off early sight lines from the CTs and allows his team to potentially push water should they need to. In both games, they decide to follow through and go mid. Twistzz, having already thrown most of his utility at the beginning of the round, is now left with very few options for clearing out the Windows double doors house area, so he's going to have to rely on his raw aim to clear the corners. In his Faceit game, his teammates have died, and it is up to Twistzz to try to clutch out the round. Knowing that his window smoke will most likely prevent the CTs from pushing behind him, Twistzz turns his attention to the double doors, where he kills the first CT pushing easily. Peeking through the double doors, he sees that mid is smoked at the halfway mark, so as he makes his way through the now faded window smoke, he pre-aims for the CT that has aggressively pushed the mid smoke. In Twistz's match against ENCE, he is again alone in a 1v2, where he catches Diha in the same exact off angle that was played in his Faceit game, as Diha had pushed up in the same way to counter the mid smoke. By constantly throwing the same utility in your games, you can start to get a sense of what your opponent's options are and how exactly to counter them, limiting how many potential scenarios that you will have to deal with and easing up on the mental load of predicting your enemies. Now, it is also equally important to know how your enemies might want to prevent your utility from getting maximum impact. There had been multiple attempts from ENCE to get aggressive and try to stop Faze from setting up all their nades before they rush, but Twistzz knows this and readily takes advantage. Again, Twistzz is a beast whenever he plays defensively, whether that be anchoring or playing more passively on T side, so when Twistzz can force the CTs to try to push into him, he tries to, as it suits his playstyle a lot more comfortably. Of course, you shouldn't always default your nades. Here's Twistzz utilizing his nades to directly help with the A-side execute in his Faze game, and saving his molly and smoke for the mid push in the pro game. This is usually when Twistzz plays as a second entry for his teammates, where his nades now have the express purpose of assisting his entry fragger, which is karrigan in both games. But sometimes, karrigan and ropz will drop their smokes and flashes for Twistzz, so that he can continue to default while also giving him some flexibility for the late round. Always remember that even if you are using utility in a more selfish way, the main purpose of your nades is that they should at least threaten a potential push. If there is no threat of at least some kind of follow-up, there really isn't any reason to respond to these nades in a meaningful way. Although Faze doesn't push B on most of these rounds, Twistzz always makes sure that the threat of a lurk is always present. Obviously, punishing aggressive CTs is a pretty good way to make them not stick out their head too much, but also spamming the B main smoke or occasionally following through with your lurk are great ways to keep CTs on constant alert and wary of your presence even if you're not where you normally play. Playing like this won't necessarily make you a god at the game or give you Twistzz level of crosshair placement. You still need to have great aim to justify playing a more selfish role, but it could help you gain more value on the T side if you're a more defensive oriented player or need an alternative way to use nades if you feel like you're not getting much use out of them. Because if all goes wrong and defaulting nades isn't really conditioning your opponents, at least you can say you died without wasting utility, which means you are very good at making every dollar count, so congrats. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video and subscribe if you haven't, it really means a lot, and I'll see you guys very soon.